This video is all about the Matlab path. The Matlab path is a list of folders that Matlab searches through in order to find functions and files. So the idea is that you might have thousands or maybe tens of thousands of files scattered throughout your computer in lots and lots of different folders. And if you are using a network drive, then you might have even more, like a mind-bogglingly large number of folders and files all throughout your computer and all the computers that you are networked to. So it is not reasonable for Matlab to search through everywhere on your computer, everything that is attached to your computer, to find a particular folder. That would take forever, or a particular file. So the idea instead is that Matlab has a relatively small number of folders that it looks through, and Matlab will only be able to find files and folders if they are in the path in one of those folders. All right, so I'm going to show you how to view your path. I'm going to show you two different ways, a good way and a bad way, to modify the Matlab path, and I will give you a demonstration of why the path is so important and what can happen if you have a file, if you're trying to find a file or function that is not in the path. So I'm actually going to start with a demonstration. In the previous video, we created this function here called basic stats, which basically just computes a couple of descriptive statistics and then prints them out and so on. So what I showed you in the previous video is that we can call this function, so basic stats, and then I just inputted some random numbers, and we get some output. So yeah, the output is the display, and then we get the output here. Okay, so the thing is that that file is contained in the folder where we are currently working. So the address bar here is the same as, so our current folder is the same as the folder where this particular file is stored. So what I'm going to do now is move into a different folder. I'm going to use a Unix function called mkdir. That stands for make directory, or create a new folder. And let's call it temp, TMP. So now I can move into that folder, and I can do that up here, but I'm just going to do it here. I'm going to say cd, that stands for change directory, to temp. Now notice that that has changed our directory. We were previously in scripts, and now we are in scripts temp. Okay, and then I'm going to press the up arrow key to get to exactly this line of code here, which just ran, and we get an error message. We don't get the results that we expected. It says basic stats is not found in the current folder or on the Matlab path. Now, what's pretty interesting is Matlab actually recognizes that this is a file that used to be in the current folder. So it exists in this location. So Matlab is actually giving us some pretty helpful information. In other cases, Matlab will just basically print out this message. It will say basic stats is unknown. It is not found. It is not a recognized variable or file. Now, this seems like a really weird phenomenon until you understand about the path. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to be able to call that function basic stats regardless of our current working directory, or regardless of where on the computer this file is stored. You know, maybe we want to store this file on a network drive or on a USB stick and so on. And that's what we need the path for. Okay, so with that as a demonstration, I want to now show you how to view the path. So the way you can view the path is you click on Home, and then over here, we've already been looking at preferences before for changing the color and the font size and so on. And now we're going to press Set Path. So that opens up this new window. And first, it's going to show you all the folders that are in the Matlab path. So you can see there's quite a lot of them. And basically all of them are in, on a Windows computer, it's going to be program files, Matlab, the version number, and then toolbox or whatever is the particular folder. So these are all the folders that we will search through. And then there is users and then your username, and documents and MATLAB. I'm going to talk more about this particular folder in a later video towards the end of this course. This is where you would store your personal MATLAB files, and it's also where you can store something called a startup and a finish file. Okay, so if we want to add a folder, we can click here, Add Folder, and then that will allow us to select a folder here. So I'm going to select this one, and now that added a new line onto this list. So we get a new folder that MATLAB is going to search through. So and then you can also select Add with Subfolders, and that is if you want to select all of the folders and then all the subfolders. So I actually only selected this folder OnRamp, but MATLAB looked through OnRamp and it selected, it also put into the path every single subfolder, including all these subfolders like this one. Now, if I were to click Save, that's going to permanently change the path forever. Well, not forever, but until you change it back. But this will permanently change it for all future MATLAB sessions. Now, I recommend strongly against doing this. I don't think it's a good idea to permanently change the MATLAB path. So I'm actually going to remove all of these folders that I just added. I'm going to select Remove. And now this is dangerous. I really don't recommend using this window at all to set the path. I just want to show you that it exists. Because, if I were to remove these folders, that's a terrible idea. This is probably going to cause some significant damage to MATLAB. And then if I were to remove this and then save the new path without all of these folders, that can really, really screw up MATLAB for all of your future sessions. You will probably need to recreate the path from scratch. So please do not remove any folders from the MATLAB path unless you're super duper confident that it's okay to do that. Okay, so I didn't actually make any changes here. I undid all the changes that I made. So I'm just going to press close. Now, that is the first way of changing the path. And as a reminder, I do not recommend changing the MATLAB path in that fashion. A much better way to add a folder to the MATLAB path is to use a function called add path. So this is going to add a folder to the MATLAB path only for the current session. So I'm going to run this line of code in a moment. That's going to add this folder to the path. But then if I quit this MATLAB session and open up MATLAB again, then I will have to run this line of code again. I think that's great because I'm not permanently changing the MATLAB path. Okay, so I'm going to run this line and it doesn't do anything. Nothing in particular happens. However, now, because the folder that I've added is this folder where I keep this basic stats file. So now I can run this line of code again and we get a regular output without any error messages. And that's because now MATLAB knows exactly where that file lives. It can see it in its path. Okay, so this is for adding a single folder to the path. We can also add all of the subfolders to the path, and that's by embedding this function genPath into the function addPath. So the way this works is you specify the top level folder that you want to add, and when you input that into genPath, you can see what that will look like. So I run that. It's just a really long string, but you can see it's this folder OnRamp, and then MATLAB is going to include all of these subfolders. So OnRamp control, OnRamp, this folder is called data, input, output, and so on. So there's lots of folders in here, and they all come from this main OnRamp. And then I input that into addPath, and now I'm adding not just this folder, but this folder plus every subfolder and all these subfolders and subfolders and so on. Now, if you are trying to run this code on your computer exactly like this, it is probably going to give you an error message, and that's because I'm guessing that your username on your computer is not MXC. So you will likely have to change something in here to add the appropriate path for your particular computer. And of course, Unix-based operating systems, the path looks different, and Mac, the path looks different, and so on. So you will have to figure that stuff out. So in this video, I introduced you to the concept of a MATLAB path. I showed you two ways to modify the path, although really there's only one way to modify it because there's one appropriate good way to modify it, and then there's the wrong way to do it.